All right, it is time for studio review. So for the studio review, I did a little bit to get us started. I created a few items. This is similar to where we left off last week. And so we have a few menu items, blueberry smoothie, we have kale sludge, and carrots for the win are 3 menu items. What was that? Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, cool. So I'll back up. We are inside the main class. Here we are referencing the menu item class. We're creating 3 instances of it. This is just to get us set up. After this, we'll start coding. And so we have blueberry smoothie. It's got a price of $4. The description is blueberry smoothie. Category is fruit. And is new is false. Kale sludge is negative $5. They pay you to take this one. Description kale sludge, category veggie, etc. Then carrots for the win is a bit more expensive at $6. So create several items. We've done that in preparation, and then we're adding them to the menu. So how we do this is we create an array list or a hash map or however else you choose to do this. And then we add each item to the list. Then we create a new instance of menu with the menu items. So this is our setup. And so in each of these files, I basically extracted the to-do items from the studio, so we won't really be jumping back and forth. At least hopefully we'll be able to avoid that. So I think a good place to start will be the to-do items inside of menu, and then we'll fill out the to-do items and menu items as needed. Cool. So the first thing that we're going to do, this might not be in order of the studio, but this is definitely an item from the studio, is we need to add a way, there needs to be a way to add and remove menu items from the menu. So we know that when we create so when we create a new menu, we set a collection of items. But this is wanting the ability to add an individual item. And so here we will say public. And this is going to be, the type is going to be menu item, it's just one of them. And then we're going to call this, actually this would be public void because we're not returning anything. Public void add menu item is what I'm going to call it. And we're going to take in a menu item. We're going to call it menu item. And then we're going to say this dot, what is it called? It's items, this dot items dot add menu item. Okay, so what we're doing is we're accessing the array list, and we're using the array list's built-in method called add, and we're adding a menu item to the array list. So instead of doing it all at once, when we create an instance of the class, we also now have the ability to add them one at a time. Cool. So now we need to do the opposite. So also be public void. I'm going to say remove menu item. Now this one, I'm going to say remove. This one I need to test because I'm not sure offhand that this is going to work how I think it should, but let's find out. So in order to test this, we want to be able to kind of walk through the steps. So I'm going to jump over to the main class, and I'm going to try to remove kale sludge. It wasn't very popular, even though we paid people. So let's say smoothie menu dot remove menu item kale sludge, and then smoothie menu dot get items. We want to wrap that in a print statement. So the whole purpose of what I'm doing right now is just to test my assumptions that what I wrote works. Okay, so I don't have a very good print statement set up yet. That's going to come later in the exercise or in the studio. But we could see here I had 3 items at this print statement. I remove an item, I print again, and now I have 2 items. So I'm going to assume it's working how I want it to. That's good enough for me to move on. Cool. So we're back in our menu class. Let me expand this. There we go. All right, so the next thing we need is a way to tell when the menu was last updated. Now, okay, dealing with dates, that's always different. However, in whatever context we're doing this as a developer, I will say in my experience as a developer, dates are just, you would wish that there's just a standard way you handle them all the time, but they just have a way of being tricky, especially when you deal with time zones. For this use case, we don't have to get too crazy with it. We just need a way to create and store dates. So we don't have a date field yet, so I'm going to have to modify the fields and add a date field. And so there's a couple different date types in Java. I'm not incredibly familiar with all of them, but we're going to try to use just date object. We're going to call this last updated. Cool. So at this point, we have a date. Now, we have a decision on how we are going to set this date initially. And so a standard way of setting a field, of course, is to set it with our constructor. So we could add a last updated section to our constructor, and we'll just pass in the date when we create it. But I have an idea for this I think might work a little bit better. We can say this dot last updated equals new date. So when we create a new instance of the data object, it's going to create a new instance of the data object with the current time. At least this is what I'm assuming. And so now that we have our last updated, it gets a date when we create the menu. That's a good start for now. Now we need to add a getter for that date. So I'm going to use the generate tool, which is super fun, and add the last updated. Cool. So now we have get last updated. Let's test this. And we're going to test it using a print statement. So we'll say smoothie menu dot get last updated. And so if my assumptions are correct, this should give us a time. Cool. So this gives us April 6th, military time, so 20. And that's accurate. Yeah, Central Time, 2023. This looks good. It looks how we want it to be. So that was actually pretty clean, pretty easy to do. I was expecting maybe a fight with the dates. That worked out pretty well. Cool. So I am going to make an edit. I don't know if it mentions this specifically in the code or in the studio, but I would really like to update the last updated every time we do something. So if we set an item, we're going to update the last updated. If we add a menu item, if we remove a menu item. And so now I've got this nice little bit of code that's always going to make sure that my last updated it's good to go. And so because I can do that, I think I like this better than setting last updated with the constructor. And I'm doing it programmatically, so we don't have to worry about accidentally forgetting to include it when we're adding or removing an item. So I think this is good. We'll go with this. All right, what's the next thing? So we have this thing that says, okay, we need a way to print out both a single menu item as well as the entire menu. So this might be tricky, particularly the entire menu part. And so there's sort of a question of like, okay, I know I should put the ability to print the entire menu inside the menu class, but what about a single menu item? I don't think that belongs here. So we're going to break this to-do item up, and we're just going to focus on printing out the entire menu. But before I do that, I want to be able to print out a single item. And so for that, we're going to pause working on the menu class and shift focus over to the menu item class. All right, so we need a way to tell, starting with our to-do items. We'll get down to this last one here eventually. But for now, we need to tell if a menu item is new. So we can just add a getter, but is new okay? This is okay. And so we could do something like, let's just test it out here. In our print statement, we'll just get kale sludge, and we'll say dot is new. And let's see what this gives us. Let's see what Java will give us when we ask it, is it new? It'll tell us true. That's okay. Maybe that's what we want it to do, but I personally, in this context, would like it to say new, or this menu item is new, or this menu item is not new. It might be nice if it gave us a statement like that. So we're going to just quickly modify this with an if statement. So we'll say if this dot is new, return, we're also going to change this to the type of string, return we'll say is new. It's not super amazing, but that's good enough for now. And then we'll just call it is old. We could think about that longer, but it's probably not worth the effort. All right, so now if I run this again, and instead of just telling me to be true, it'll tell me it is new. So that's cool. Focusing on the menu items, now we need a way to determine whether or not two menu items are equal. And if you remember the lecture, if we use the built-in is equal method or equals method, it's not very helpful. It just tells us if it's pointing to the exact same spot in memory. Even if it's identical in every other way, it's going to say false when we create two classes. We don't want that. And so a cool thing that came up in the reading was that we can use the generator to generate an equals method. Let's see what our options are. Hit next, don't click on any of the checkboxes, thank you. All right, cool. What do I want to compare? I am okay in this case only comparing the description, because to me, if we have two things named the same, even if they're different prices, I think of them as the same thing in the context of a menu. You may disagree, and that's okay, but we're just going to keep it comparing the strings. All right, cool. So let's look at what this created for us. So we have an override equals method. It takes in an object. This is very this is a very generic way of passing in the object, because it could be that we're comparing two menu items, but we could accidentally compare like a menu item and a doggo. And that doesn't make any sense, but we don't want it to crash it. So we're going to take in any kind of an object. And so we're going to say, first, are we comparing two of the exact same thing? So for example, if we were to say, let me see if I can show an example. If we were to say something like, does blueberry smoothie equals blueberry smoothie? So if we're doing the exact same thing, this if statement right here, it's a one-liner if statement, a bit weird to look at. This if statement here, does this equal the object we're comparing it to? If it's the exact same thing in memory, it's going to return true, and then the equals ends there. If it's not the exact same thing in memory, now we're going to customize it a bit. Well, first we gotta check, is this the same type of, is this the same, are these both instances of the same class? And so this is gonna check, so first, is the object null? If it is, we're gonna return false. If the object originating class is not the same as what we're comparing it to's originating class, we're also gonna return false. And so this would return false. Let's say if we had a doggo named parsnip and we had a menu item named parsnip, and we were to do a dot equals, this is going to kick it out because the originating classes are not the same, right? So that kind of protects against that. So finally, once we get past that, let's see here, what is this saying? Menu item equals, menu item is the object, and then we compare this is just setting it up, is this typing it? So then we check, does the description, you could just say it like this dot description, does this dot description equal this menu item that we're comparing it to? So there's a lot of stuff that does for us here. Pretty interesting breaking it down. Hopefully that wasn't boring. Sweet. So now we are on to the place. We got to test it. Sorry to hold things up, but we have to prove our assumptions right, in my opinion. So we will create a new blueberry smoothie 2, and we're going to change the price just because maybe that's why there's 2 of them, because they tried to update the price and they created 2 of them. True. And this gives us true. Perfect. And if we compare it exactly to itself, it's also true. And then if we compare it to Kale Sludge, it is false. All right, we're on track. So let's jump back over to this item right here. So we want a way to print out a single menu item. There's a couple different ways we could go about this. We could create a method called like print menu item, or we could override the built-in string method. Now, one way we could do this is we could generate it to string, and we'll include everything there. We could do something like this. This looks okay. I'll show you what it looks like if we just use the built-in method. We can say to string, run it. So this says it's type menu item. It tells us its price, and it's in a very like programmatic kind of a way. It's not in like a human. It's not like in a human-centered way. Like if we were to present this on like a web page, we wouldn't want it looking like this. So we could spend some time and make this prettier. I think in the intention of keeping things rolling, we may consider making this more human readable, but we'll just leave it for now because it's MVP. It's good enough to be able to move on to the next thing. All right, so that brings us back to the menu class. We just switched context. We were looking at menu item for a while. Now we're back to looking at menu. And so we want a way to print out the entire menu. That sounds fun. So this is going to be a public class, or a public method, I'm sorry. And this, okay, I'll give you where my brain's at with this. We could do this two ways. We could do it to where we have a method that returns a long string, and then we can print this string using like the system out thing. Or we could create a method that doesn't return anything, but inside of it prints things out. I think I want to do the latter option, where we print each thing out inside the method itself instead of just returning a string. And the reason for that is I want to be able to print them all on their own line and use a loop and stuff. And in my head, this seems a little bit more along the lines of what I want to do. So we're going to make this void. It's not going to return anything. And we're going to say print full menu. All right. This does not need to take in any arguments, and it doesn't have any parameters. And so from here, all right, let's see here. So we need to loop through this array list of items. I know Java has a for each method. I don't remember the syntax for it. But let's see if we can use. All right, so we got that far. Let's see here. So for each item, I'm going to pull up an example of a for each loop on Google. Let's get an idea of what the syntax looks like demonstrated. So for each, so they have like an arrow function in here. Cool. This is what I want to see. All right. I'm going to just copy this as a reference. All right. So for each, and then we're going to call this menu item. And then we're going to say menu item dot toString. Okay. Well, maybe we also want a system out print line right here because we want to print it. All right. Let's see how this works. We're going to print the full menu. Jump back to our main class. We're going to say smoothie menu dot print full menu. And so we don't have to worry about returning anything. It's doing all of the magic inside the menu. So we're going to run it and see what happens. Making some assumptions here with the for each loop. Sweet. Okay, this is pretty good. We've got each of our menu items here, exactly how we made it with the toString method. And so we could definitely clean this up and make this look a bit more classy, if you want to call it that. But this is definitely like MVP. I'll introduce that concept later. But this is definitely like good enough for now. Right, so we have 3 more to-do items and not a lot of time. Oh, we already did this one. Sweet. So we already printed the entire menu to the screen. A bit sloppy, but good enough to progress. We know how to print an individual item to the screen. We demonstrated that earlier, and we also demonstrated this earlier. So really, we've done all of those the to-do items. I thought there was another. I thought there's a bonus item out there, but you know what? This is good. I feel like we covered some really good ground. So with our last 5 minutes or less, I would be curious if anyone has questions. Seeing at least this approach, I'm sure your approach differed. So any thoughts, any questions? Yes? I would have, except that I did something lazy and I have them all inside the same package. So because they're all inside the same package, I don't have to import them. If that makes sense. Yeah. Cool. Great question. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
You didn't use the setters at all.
I guess I didn't need to. I did not use the setters. Yeah.
It's just one of those things, like, they did have it in JavaScript also. I studied them in a different place, but I've never actually used them. I'm just curious why.
Oh, yeah. So setters are totally something that you will see used, you will use. I think in this example, we just sort of worked around them and avoided them, and we never came across needing to use them. So for anyone who couldn't hear that, the example given would be like, yeah, no, that's good. So for example, if we needed to change the name of this, like let's say we didn't want to call it blueberry smoothie, we wanted to call it like blueberry like power slush. We would use a setter 100% for something like that, because that'd be the way to do it. But yeah, excellent. So this is class. Thank you all for engaging, and I'll see you all Monday. Thank you.